Good afternoon, everyone. So it's a pleasure today to introduce Pichu Mekrofer from my lab. Let me start by saying that Pichu is an excellent student, and it's a real pleasure to have in the lab. Pichu came to us from India. She graduated with a degree in pharmaceutical sciences and technology from the Institute of Chemical Technology of Mumbai. So that's an engineering degree, chemical, but very close, pharmaceutical. So she came to the lab. Of course, she's interested in the bio area. And she started working on a project at the time that was the new grant coming in from the work of Vijay Patspai, that many of you might remember. And the project had to do with a cell type Vivek discovered in the skin that had characteristic of what's called neural crest. And Vivek will describe neural crest, but briefly, neural crest appears only in development. We don't have, anybody who was born doesn't have neural crest, but it gives rise to peripheral nervous system. And Vivek found like this cell type in the skin and did a lot of work in it. So when Pichu came to the lab along with George, who just graduated in the summer, and he moved on to the University of Colorado for a postdoc, they started working, and then Ashish joined them as well on this project. And so Pichu participated on many projects. He worked with George on how to differentiate those cells into one cell type is called Schwann cell. And Schwann cell makes myelin and protects neurons. She also worked on other projects trying to make the cells multipotent. And more recently, she started working on the metabolism that regulates the fate of those cells and how we can keep these cells multipotent. And multipotency means that these are stem cells, so they can differentiate into multiple cell types. But over time in culture, they lose that ability. And so people found a way to restore that multipotency, which is a critical characteristic of stemness, using the knowledge about the metabolism. And that's what she will talk about today. So Pichu.
Thank you, Dr. Andriadis, for the introduction, and I'd also like to thank the department for giving me this opportunity to present my work today. Stem cells have contributed vastly to the modern era of regenerative medicine and have shown great potential for the treatment of diseases, for drug testing, and also to understand the pathogenesis of multiple diseases. Nevertheless, efforts continue to find safer and cost-effective sources of stem cells and to develop ways to preserve their self-renewal capacity in culture. My PhD work focuses on understanding how signaling pathways influence cellular metabolism to preserve the multipotency of adult tissue-derived stem cells. I'd like to start this presentation by introducing a cell type that plays a huge role in the development of multiple tissues during embryogenesis, the neural crest stem cells. Human embryo development takes place over a span of 40 weeks as a result of highly coordinated and well-timed signaling events. Neural crest formation starts at the 4th week with the onset of neurulation. By this time, the human embryo exists as a trigeminal disc composed of the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Signaling events from the notochord induce differentiation of the ectoderm above it to neural plate, which is separated from the non-neural ectoderm by the neural plate border. Next, the neural plate folds onto itself until it completely closes and forms the neural tube. The neural plate border cells delaminate from the ectoderm and form the neural crest cells. The delaminating neural crest cells undergo epithelial to mesenchymal transition and migrate throughout the developing embryo. Hence, these cells have a very migratory phenotype. These cells are also highly multipotent and give rise to various tissues in the human body depending upon their embryonic location. Cranially derived neural crest cells give rise to the craniofacial cartilage, to the osteoblasts, as well as to the cranial neurons. Vaguely derived neural crest cells give rise to the smooth muscle cells in the heart. Trunk cells give rise to the melanocytes in the skin, while both trunk and sacral cells give rise to the peripheral neurons and Schwann cells. Embryonic neural crest cells have a very transient phenotype, and they quickly lose their plasticity at the onset of migration. These cells express the key transcription factors MYC, FOXD3, ID, TFAP2, SNAIL, and SOX10. Of these, SOX10 has been considered to be the key transcription factor and governs the processes of migration, self-renewal, and differentiation. Given the vast contribution of neural crest cells throughout embryo development, these have been regarded as the fourth germ layer, and efforts have been made to isolate these cells from non-embryonic sources. iPSCs and ESCs have been differentiated to neural crest cells and have shown to promote peripheral nerve regeneration, tendon repair, and even induce erythropoiesis in mice. Studies have also used these cells to model the pathogenesis and treatment of patient-specific neurocristopathies like familial dysautonomia, CHART syndrome, and pigmentation defects that arise due to abnormal neural crest development. These cells have also been used to understand the progression of tumors related to neural crest origin. Recent attempts have been made to isolate these cells from postnatal tissues like the DRG, cardiac tissue, cornea, gut, and bone marrow. However, these cells can only be isolated from the dental pulp and hair follicles of the adult human tissue because of non-accessibility and lack of non-invasive means to isolate these cells from other organs. In our lab, we have successfully isolated neural crest-like cells from the human neonatal epidermis, and we call these cells KCNCs, which is the short for keratinocyte-derived neural crest cells. The isolation process involves a very simple skin biopsy to obtain the skin tissue, which is followed by enzymatic digestion of the tissue using the enzyme Dispase2 to facilitate the manual peeling of the epidermis from the dermis. The keratinocytes obtained from the dissociation of the epidermis are grown on a feeder layer, and neural crest induction occurs in by treating the cells in a media rich in BFGF and IGF for 7 days. Previously, past students in our lab, Vivek and George, have characterized these cells and have shown that after 7 days of induction, these cells lose the epidermal genes which were expressed in keratinocytes that were isolated from the skin at day 0, especially the markers keratin 14 and keratin 5. These cells also start expressing the developmentally relevant neural crest genes like FOXT3, Nestin, NGFR, and SOX10. Further work by another student in our lab, Samane, showed that KCNCs could be isolated from the epidermis of adult human donors within the age groups of 67 to 93. And these cells also expressed key neural crest genes like SOX10, FOXT3, and PAX3. To assess how similar KCNCs are to embryonic neural crest cells, KCs and NCs derived from them were labeled with the green fluorescence protein and implanted into the head mesenchyme of a developing chick embryo. We wanted to see if KCNCs could migrate alongside developmental embryonic neural crest cells and give rise to neural crest derivatives. Indeed, while implanted keratinocytes did not migrate away from the implantation site, KCNCs could migrate throughout the developing embryo and give rise to the full repertoire of neural crest derivatives. Green label cells were found to differentiate to neurons and glia in the DRG, to melanocytes below the ectoderm, to smooth muscle cells around the vessel and heart, and they were also present in the branchial arches, gut wall, and mesenchyme. This experiment established that KCNCs are very similar to embryonic neural crest cells in terms of their migratory and developmental potential. KCNCs can be obtained without genetic modifications using a very simple cocktail of growth factors from the skin, which is the most abundant tissue in the human body. These cells can also be isolated from adult donors, making them a highly effective patient-specific source for their use in regenerative medicine. However, just like embryonic neural crest cells, KCNCs also have a very transient phenotype, and they quickly lose their multipotency in culture. RNA sequencing analysis revealed that while KCNCs expressed all key developmental neural crest genes, highlighted here by green arrows, at day 7, and especially the key transcription factor SOX10, highlighted here in red, all of these markers were lost within another week in culture. We further confirmed this by RT-PCR analysis, which showed that expression of key neural crest genes like SOX10, AP2A, MYC-N, PAX7, and HNK1 was rapidly lost in culture over time. This indicated a loss of self-renewal capacity of KCNCs. To address this challenge, we hypothesized that exposing our cells to signaling events that take place during development could play a key role in governing their multipotency. During embryogenesis, neural crest formation takes place in response to two key signaling events: the Wnt signaling pathway from the neural tube and the BMP signaling pathway from the developing epidermis. Both these signaling pathways have been shown to play a key role in governing the intricate gene regulatory network that specifies neural crest lineage. To understand the effect of Wnt and BMP signaling on the multipotency of KCNCs, we expanded neural crest cells from the skin for 9 days and then treated our cells with either BMP2, which is a BMP signaling agonist, or CHIR, which is a Wnt signaling agonist, for 5 days. And untreated cells served as the control. Treatment of the cells with both CHIR and BMP2 upregulated the expression of all neural crest genes like SOX10, PAX7, SNAIL, MECN, HNK1, tyrosine kinase C, and AP2A, while individual treatments with these agonists did not seem to have much of an effect. To confirm this further, we stained our cells for the key transcription factor SOX10, and cells treated with both CHIR and BMP2 upregulated SOX10 expression by 150-fold. While CHIR alone also could increase SOX10 expression to some extent, BMP2 alone did not seem to have much of an effect as compared to untreated cells. These results demonstrated that Wnt and BMP signaling enhanced KCNC multipotency, and hence it was crucial for us to understand the mechanisms by which these signaling events alter cell behavior. Particularly, we were interested in studying how embryonic signaling events could alter cellular metabolism, because dysregulated metabolism has been found to be linked to the pathogenesis of several neurocrestopathies. Cellular metabolism has been shown to be key in determining the cell fate of multipotent stem cells. ESCs and iPSCs, which have a high ability to self-renew, have been shown to rely mostly on glycolysis for their energy needs. As a result, they have increased expression of key glycolytic enzymes and have a poorly functional mitochondria. As the cells start losing their plasticity and differentiating, these cells switch their metabolism from glycolysis to OXPHOS and start expressing increased levels of mitochondrial enzymes and have a more functional TCA cycle. Energy demands of KCNCs post-treatment with CHIR and BMP2 was first evaluated by measuring total ATP levels by culturing the cells in a glucose-rich media. We found out that cells treated with CHIR and BMP2 expressed double the amount of ATP, which could be inhibited by the glycolysis inhibitor 2-DG to a greater extent as compared to untreated cells. We also found out that individual treatments with CHIR and BMP2 did not seem to have much of an effect on ATP, which meant that both of these signaling pathways, Wnt and BMP, worked in a coordinated fashion to alter cellular bioenergetics. Increased glycolytic ATP then prompted us to check the levels of lactate, which is the end product of glycolysis. Cells treated with CHIR and BMP2 had increased lactate production, which could also be inhibited by the glycolysis inhibitor 2-DG, which meant that the lactate was truly a product of glycolytic function. Next, we employed the Seahorse assay platform to measure cellular bioenergetics in real time. Glucose utilized by the cell is converted to pyruvate and subsequently to lactate, resulting in a production and extrusion of protons into the extracellular medium, making it acidic. Hence, extracellular acidification rate, or ECAR, is truly a measure of glycolysis. In this assay, cells are first cultured in media lacking glucose, and then glucose is injected to the cell. The amount of increase in ECAR, which means that the amount of lactate produced, is then called as glycolysis. Next, oligomycin is injected to the cells, and oligomycin is an inhibitor of mitochondrial ATP production. As a result, cells are forced to rely completely on glycolysis for their energy needs, and hence the ECAR measured is a measure of glycolytic capacity. Finally, the final injection 2-DG completely inhibits ECAR and shows that the lactate recorded in the experiment is because of glycolysis. Cells treated with CHIR and BMP2, which were multipotent KCNCs, reacted more to the glucose injection and hence had higher glycolysis. Surprisingly, we also found out that these cells did not respond to oligomycin injection, which meant that they were operating at maximum glycolytic capacity for satisfying their metabolic needs. To measure the mitochondrial function of cells, we measured the oxygen consumption rate, or OCR. Mitochondrial respiration requires oxygen to produce ATP in the electron transport chain, and hence the amount of oxygen consumed by the cells is truly a function of mitochondrial respiration. The OCR levels recorded during the start of the experiment is a measure of basal respiration. The first injection here is oligomycin, which inhibits the complex 5 of electron transport chain, which is the main complex producing ATP. Hence, the drop in ECAR is a measure of ATP produced from mitochondrial function. The second injection, FCCP, disrupts the proton gradient across the mitochondria, hence pushing the mitochondrial function to maximum, and this is measured as maximal respiration. The final injection is a combination of rotenone and antimycin A, which inhibits multiple complexes of the electron transport chain and hence completely decreases the OCR levels. The untreated cells which had lost their multipotency had increased levels of maximal respiration, basal respiration, and had increased ATP production from mitochondria. Surprisingly, cells that were treated with CHIR and BMP2 had very low levels of basal respiration, and they did not respond to mitochondrial modulators, which meant that they had abolished their mitochondrial activity. The contribution of glycolysis and oxidative phosphorylation to total ATP production was measured using the ATP rate assay, and we found out that cells treated with CHIR and BMP2 utilized most of their ATP through glycolysis, while untreated cells heavily relied on mitochondrial respiration for ATP production. Increased glycolysis is often accompanied by increased glucose consumption. We found out that cells treated with CHIR and BMP2 increased the expression of key glucose transporters GLUT1, GLUT3, and GLUT4, and had increased levels of intracellular glucose, which meant that they consumed more glucose. Interestingly, we also found out that the amount of SOX10 expressed by the cells depended upon the amount of glucose in the media. Cells cultured in higher concentrations of glucose expressed almost double the amount of SOX10 as compared to cells cultured in lower concentration of glucose. This result indicated that glycolytic metabolites and substrates could play a key role in neural crest gene expression. Since Wnt and BMP signaling completely altered KCNC transcriptomics and cellular metabolism, we wanted to see if these signaling pathways also affected the epigenetic landscape of cells. Cells treated with CHIR and BMP2 upregulated the expression of enzymes related to the DNA demethylase activity. Specifically, enzymes corresponding to the methylation of lysine 4, 27, and 9 of histone 3 were upregulated, while the DNA methyltransferase DNMT3B was downregulated. And all of these epigenetic modifications have been reported in the literature to be key for self-renewal of embryonic neural crest cells. Finally, we wanted to see if the treatment of cells with CHIR and BMP2 could rescue the differentiation potential of these cells, which would ultimately make it better for regenerative medicine application. Cells pre-treated with CHIR and BMP2 differentiated better to smooth muscle cells as seen by increased expression of ASMA and Caldesmon, to Schwann cells as seen by increased expression of the glial markers CROX20 and PLP1, and to melanocytes as seen by increased expression of melanocytic markers MITF and PMEL. Now that we have developed ways to enhance the multipotency of KCNCs, current work in our lab focuses on using these cells for regenerative medicine applications. Specifically, we want to see if KCNCs can be used for the treatment of demyelinating diseases because they are a very good source of Schwann cells, which are the myelinating cells of the peripheral nervous system, and we want to see if KCNCs can also myelinate the brain, which is the central nervous system. Implantation of cells in the brain is a very challenging task. Since implantation is done using a syringe, the cells are exposed to very high shear, and as a result, it causes cell death. These cells are also very prone to microglial invasion, and very often the diseased brain lacks the correct biological cues that is needed by the cells to proliferate and survive. This makes seeing any functional recovery after transplantation of cells in the brain a very far-fetched idea. To tackle this challenge, Mohammed, who's a postdoc in our lab, has developed a shear thinning hydrogel which can be mixed with our cells and transplanted into the brain. The hydrogel is composed of a supramolecular crosslinker which consists of pegylated adamantane and cyclodextrin conjugated melamide. The bonds formed between adamantane, which is the blue circle here, and the cyclodextrin, which is the yellow cone, is a physical bond, and hence it's a very dynamic bond. On application of shear, the bonds are broken and the viscosity of the material goes down as shown by rheological measurements here. And as shear is removed or decreased, the viscosity goes back up. This demonstrates the true shear thinning nature of the hydrogel. The polymer also consists of thiolated hyaluronic acid and thiolated heparin. And thiolated heparin is the key component that helps in immobilization of biological cues, such as growth factors which have the heparin binding domain, like PDGF and FGF. Further, to test these cells, George started these experiments, and then now they are being done by Ashish in our lab. They wanted to see if the hydrogel could first prevent cell death during shear, and so they did an experiment where they passed the cells through a syringe, either in the presence of hydrogel or in the absence of hydrogel, and cells that were not passed through the syringe or no shear were served as the control. They found out that in the absence of syringe, due to the shear stress, there was 30% cell death, while the hydrogel prevented the cell death by around 3 times. In vivo efficacy of the hydrogel to increase the survival of the cells was checked by implanting these cells in the corpus callosum of the mouse brain. And survival of the cells was checked by staining the cells for the human nuclear antigen, which stained for the human cells, which were our cells. We found out that cells that were implanted in the presence of the shear thinning hydrogel stained for more number of human nuclear antigen positive as compared to cells which were implanted in the absence of hydrogel. Future work in this project aims to test if KCNCs can be used to remyelinate the brain of a Shriver mouse model, which is a mouse model with a hypomyelinated brain. In conclusion, we report a method to isolate neural crest-like stem cells from the skin and show that these cells can be kept multipotent in culture by treatment with the Wnt agonist CHIR or BMP2. Future efforts in this project aim to establish this cell type as a very promising source for treatment of demyelinating disorders using biomaterials-based approach. With this, I'd like to end my talk. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr. Andreadis for his support and guidance throughout the years. I'd also like to thank all my committee members, Dr. Pfeiffer, Dr. Parshurama, and Dr. Feltri. Also, all our collaborators. RNA sequencing analysis was done by Yali and Dr. Wong and Dr. Liu. Chick embryo implantations was done in the lab of Dr. Marianne Bronner at Caltech, and brain implantations are currently being pursued as a collaboration with Dr. Fraser Sim and his lab. I'd also like to specially thank Izwagi because he helped me a lot with all the metabolic assays, and George because he taught me how to culture these cells when I was first starting the lab. Also Mohammed, Ashish, and Samane for their contribution to the project, and everyone else in the Andreadis lab. Thank you, and I'm open to questions.
Really nice talk. I have a question about the CHIR and BMP2 treatment. It seems that, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the glycolysis is running at its full capacity and the mitochondria is turned off. Then if I'm thinking about glycolysis, and at the end of that you have pyruvate, if that doesn't feed into mitochondria, it goes somewhere, it goes to lactate.
Yeah. So it goes to lactate, and we have done assays to check if PDH, which is the enzyme that converts pyruvate to acetyl-CoA in the mitochondria, if it is phosphorylated, it means that it's inactive, and hence pyruvate cannot become acetyl-CoA and feed into the mitochondria. So with CHIR and BMP2, yes, the PDH is phosphorylated, and hence all the pyruvate becomes lactate.
And that goes out to the...
Yes.
Okay.
I have a similar question on the same topic. So you're saying over time it loses its multi-potency, right? So at what point do you start the treatment of the Wnt signal?
So usually at 7 days after induction of these cells, they are multipotent, and then after 14 within 14 days, they are not, they lose the expression. So I start treatment on 9 days, and that's only because I need like those 2 extra days to just expand the cells to have enough cells. And then I treat them for 5 days, which I found to be enough to upregulate all the neural crest specific genes and also cause all metabolic changes.
So is there a point where they can't go back, or like if you treated them later down the line, does it not work?
It does work, but it just requires more days of treatment.
Yes, I was wondering how do you quantify viscosity?
So I haven't done those experiments. I was just presenting it, but those were done by measuring rheology using oscillating shear rates. And Ashish has a poster outside. He has done those experiments, so you can talk to him.
I'd be able to enjoy the talk. Couple questions. Maintaining these progenitor cells is a pretty hard problem in stem cell biology. Did you guys identify any extracellular matrix components to support your maintenance or growth of your neural crest cells? Is that related to the BMP and Wnt effect?
I haven't checked that extracellular matrix.
So you're growing them just on this tissue culture treated plastic?
Yes, usually we culture our cells on collagen, and we just do that even for treatment with CHI and BMP.
Okay,
But
so they're on collagen as well?
yes, but it's something that we should definitely look into.
One more question too. Have you tested Wnt and BMP inhibitors? And then also have you, just to solidify your story about Wnt and BMP together enhancing potency? And then also have you tested Wnt and BMP in the absence of glucose in the medium and things like that, just to kind of understand the metabolism?
I haven't checked the inhibitors of Wnt and BMP, but now I think I should because it's a very good point. But if I culture my cells in the absence of glucose in the media, they die. So they definitely need glucose, but we have checked inhibitors of glycolytic metabolites and glucose, and we have shown that those decrease oxygen expression.
Last call for questions. All right, let's thank people again.
Thank you.